David Grove developed clean language along with various associates in, I think, starting in the 1980s. And interesting fact about him is that he had part European heritage and part Maori heritage. He's from New Zealand. And I always wonder how that Maori part of his heritage influenced his sense of language, because in a lot of the things he wrote, he talks about language in a very somatic way. And certainly we know most indigenous communities, including the Shinto one in Japan, which is sort of more in my uh, background of how, I work with shiatsu. Um, there's this really deep respect for language as an almost sacred thing. So, certainly a very somatic thing. So that's an interesting thing to bear in mind when we look at his guiding principles. These are four basic principles that he came up with in a research group in London about nearly 30 years ago. I love that expression, the delivery of language as a healing art. Already you have a sense that this isn't just about asking questions. It's not just normal kind of psychotherapy. This is the delivery of language as a healing art. And to do that, of course, you have to deliver it from a healthy place in your own body, a healthy sense of your own nervous system, a healthy sense of openness and curiosity about the other. So, principle number one, have a look at that. Clients have within themselves the ability to heal the psychological and somatic wounds of their biographical, ancestral, and cultural past. So they have it within themselves. This is principle number one. Number two, it's not just mind, it's body, psychological and somatic. And then number three, biographical, what's happened in your own life story, but also ancestral, interesting word for him to use in the 1980s, and cultural past. Those two things, in fact, this whole principle is pretty much normal in almost every kind of therapy nowadays. The whole of this first principle, nothing too surprising there. But it is interesting that he's using that word ancestral, which, of course, in indigenous cultures is absolutely central to one's sense of self and being. That all the ancestors who came before. If you think of Australian Aborigine culture, the Aborigines have been in Australia for about 60,000 years, living on that land. And that sense of, well, we're just here at the moment, but so many people were there before us, and how we've lost that almost completely in our modern way of living. And the cultural past, that now that is, of course, very mainstream, looking at cultural trauma and so on. But again, he was bringing it in, I think, fairly early on. So that's principle number one. Number two, every negative symptom has within itself a deeply coded solution, which will not only abate the initial presenting symptom, but will also contribute a confidently positive resource. And this is exactly what we're trying to do with our clean questions is, and our body friendly language, of course, is to get a person into a safe enough sense of themselves and safe enough sense of being with in the room with us that they can actually turn towards the uncomfortable thing in that mindful kind of way and listen to what is the coded stuff in here. Metaphors are a kind of coded information, whether they're physical, somatic metaphors, or whether they're visual metaphors or poetic metaphors. Turning towards symptoms and listening to them to find out what it is they have to tell us about the where is the positive energy here in this person. So, how to keep that sense of number one as you get into the trickier work here of okay, they've got these symptoms and they're fed up with them and frustrated with them, and They've kind of developed a pretty antagonistic attitude to parts of themselves because of that, and so on. You know, that's where it starts getting tricky. That's where we need to find our own resources and our own resilience. And then number three brings us into something which is pretty much getting into what clean is all about. And these are David Grove's own words. So our role is visiting the client's model of the world and unfolding solutions, or I would say allowing them to unfold the solutions that are conducted within the language and the logical boundaries of that world. That language, of course, includes the body language that they come up with. The language and the logical boundaries of that world. So here's his particular kind of plea for a clean approach, because he says most therapies introduce fictional constructs, maybe a bit controversial there, but fictional constructs which disrupt the client's model of the world based on the therapist's training. Clean language speaks to an internal evolutionary process of the client's symptomatic world. And as well as the word evolutionary, I would add ecological, that there's this sense that as you enter that client's world, you're getting more and more sensitive to the ecology of that world, that landscape, that inner landscape of the client. And it does have an ecology and it has a history. And if you just start trying to change it, then you'll be pushing against the natural ecology of it. And going back to the principle one, what we're looking for is how could the ecology of this place begin to start healing itself. And then finally, very interesting one here, clean language is, he insisted, information centered. And meaning that this information, we're looking for it in these four different places: in the language itself, somatically in the body, spatially in this what is nowadays called the psychogeography, so that as you begin a clean session, everything in that space can become significant. Uh, like, for example, in my treatment room, I have the treatment table, and one person I was working with childhood trauma needed to get up and walk around and stand behind that table to be in a safe place. So the table became significant. So everything in the space becomes part of the psychogeography of what's actually happening for the person. And then again, temporarily, as we saw in step one, not just the life story, but the ancestral and the cultural, the past, the present, and the future, which is what the outcome question is all about. Bringing the power of the future, of a positive, possible positive future, into the present moment. Okay. And then to sum that all up, this is the bit I really want you to keep in mind. I just tried to put this as simply as I can. Number one, we are believing in the client's self-healing ability. Sometimes you may need many sessions before that sense of a person's self-healing ability becomes apparent to them, because of this thing that so often happens with trauma, that making it part of one's own identity. Oh yeah, they could heal, but I could never do that because my trauma was much worse than theirs. That sort of thing. So that's number one. Believing in their self-healing ability, however long it takes, or however carefully you have to cultivate that sense that this is a safe and healing place to be, that your own body is a safe and healing place to be. Then number two, working with, playing with, mindfully bringing awareness to the symptoms and noticing that they do begin to communicate. You don't even need clean language. You just simply need to help the person bring attention to the symptom. And usually, when you bring attention to a symptom, something starts to change. The whole system begins to say, hey, somebody's listening. So that's number two. And then number three, we start to get really clean here. We're only using the client's model of the world. We're not bringing anything of our own stuff in. And, my sense of that is there is a kind of alchemy in that. There is an extraordinarily helpful energy that enters the space when you have made that compact with yourself, that contract with yourself. I will not try to interfere in this person's experience or their model of the world. I am simply here with open-hearted curiosity to help them explore it. Yeah. And then number 4, you are just mapping the information. Mapping is the key word there. And this is why in one of those later sessions in the course, I wanted you to look at the art of taking the client back to something you said earlier, because that's you. Your job is the mapping of that landscape. They might have come up already with several resources and then get to a really bad place. You know, and you can remind them of those resources because you've mapped them. And your only job is to help them realize the fullness of this map and that there are healing places in this landscape, however devastated some of it may seem. There are healing places, and there is a logic in this landscape which can take you to those more healing places within it. And then it is a cyclical process, because as you offer them those aspects of the map, they begin to trust in their own self-healing ability. So that simple 4-step process, I think, is pretty helpful to hold in your mind.